Well, if you don't already know it, you're right in the middle of a solar eclipse. That's right. Right now, this very second, as you're listening, you are experiencing the effects of a partial solar eclipse. It is the partner moon to the recent October 8th full-blood lunar eclipse that we had. And so we're in it. We're in it. How you feeling? You feeling it? Because I certainly am. Had a great day today. We started the eclipse at 3:38 p.m. Eastern New York time. It maxed at 5:45 p.m., just in time for rush hour for most folks getting home. And it ends tonight at 7:52 p.m., right at the end of our show. So I thought to myself, well, we better have something special planned, because normally this would be a time when I would be off the air, not doing anything public, but doing my personal work. But I figured, what a great opportunity, great time to have my guest on this evening. Eileen McKusick is here. She's going to talk about her book, Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy. So I said, what a great idea. We'll have her come on the show. We'll talk about sound healing. We'll talk about the biofield. We'll talk about anything we want. We are live tonight. If you'd like to call us and talk to us live on the air, 602-666-6027, or you can join us by going to Achieve Radio's homepage and sending me a message in our InQuick program. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So here we are. I'm really excited to be on the air tonight. I thought to myself as I was getting ready for the show, what a great way to really reach out through the ethers and join up and connect as a group, all of us, all of you who are listening, myself and my guest, to really, tune the human biofield all the way around the world, because this show airs worldwide. It streams everywhere. And if you are listening, you're actually holding, as far as I'm concerned, a grid point on this planet. So please join us. And we're going to take a break at half the hour. And when we come back, we will have some tuning forks. I'm going to use my 528 hertz tuning forks tonight to tune some love. Welcome, Eileen. Thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me on this auspicious evening.
Did you know we were having an eclipse this evening?
Well, I knew that it was today, but I didn't realize that it was still going on. So I didn't realize it would be happening while we were speaking.
I know, it's pretty awesome. I usually, like I said, I wouldn't do a show on a night like tonight. I would just be relaxing and feeling the energy, but I thought this is really great. We could really do something here. So everybody, is very anxious to hear what you do, what your story is. So, what I'd like is my guests to introduce themselves to everybody listening and talk a little bit about your story.
Sure. Well, let's see.
This is not a valid menu option.
I've been using them since 1996. I started off as a massage therapist, and I started reading some books on the use of color and sound and music in healing. And this was after I had read what I call pop quantum physics, that basically says everything is vibration. There's no real solid stuff. And I thought, well, if we're just vibration, then treating vibration with vibration makes sense. It's logical, it's elegant, and I'm a very logic-driven person. So I read every book I could find on this subject, and then I got a catalog in the mail that had a set of tuning forks for healing in it. And I decided to order them just on impulse. And I had some massage therapy clients that I was comfortable enough with to say, can you be a guinea pig for me and let me start playing with these on you? And so what I noticed, right off the bat, I noticed something sort of odd. I thought that when I held a tuning fork over someone, that it would just produce sort of a consistent, sort of objective sound. And I was really surprised to discover that the tone actually changed in pitch, in volume, in timbre. Sometimes it would sound full of static. Sometimes it would go really loud. Sometimes it would go really soft. And it seemed to be reflective or interactive with whatever was going on in the body over the place that I was holding it. So if somebody was complaining that they had pain somewhere, it would either sound very sharp or it would sound full of static. And I found that if I just held it there for a little while, the tone would start to become more clear. And then people would come back the following week and they would say, hey, all that pain in my shoulder went away, or I have been feeling so much less anxious this week. And then they would ask me to do it again. And so in pretty short order, my massage practice sort of morphed into a tuning fork practice. I also found another thing that was very peculiar, and that was that in certain areas where it would sound loud, like let's say it sounded loud over someone's hip, I thought that if it was going to sound loud anywhere, it should sound loud over the chakra. So I was working with the body's chakra system. There are 7 major energy centers that correspond to our nerve plexuses that run along the spine. And so I thought if it was going to sound loud anywhere, that's where it should be loud. And I discovered that I could actually do this curious thing that was like hooking into that loud spot with a tuning fork, like almost like you might use a magnet to hook into something like iron filings. And I could actually move it or drag it along and drop it into the chakra, and then it would sound loud over the chakra. So I called it click, drag, and drop. And I started, finding loud spots on people and sort of lining them up in the center, and that sort of became my little protocol. And I did this part-time for years. I owned a restaurant for many years, and then I was in the specialty food business. But I reached a juncture in about 2006 or 2007 when I was seeing such compelling outcomes. I was seeing like pain that people had had for 30 years disappear overnight, and massive anxiety conditions resolve in just a few sessions. And I thought, wow, I'm really onto something here, and I really feel like I need to get this out into the world. But I also found that when I told people that I used tuning forks for healing, that there was a lot of skepticism that I encountered around that. And I felt like if I'm going to take this weird thing out into the world, it would probably be helpful if I had some degree. And so I enrolled in college as an adult learner, and I spent the next few years. I got my undergraduate degree in wellness and alternative medicine. I got a master's degree in education, and now I'm currently at work on a PhD in integral health with a focus on biofield science. But I wrote a master's thesis called Exploring the Effects of Audible Sound on the Human Body and its Biofield. And what I mean by the biofield, that's the scientific term for the human energy field. So when I first started doing research in academic databases, I was looking for the human energy field and not finding anything. And then I came across a book by a fellow named Gary Schwartz, who is a professor at the University of Arizona. And this book was called The Energy Healing Experiments. And in that book, I was introduced to the term biofield. And that's a term that was chosen by National Institute of Health scientists to describe the field of energy and information that surrounds and penetrates the human body. And so when I started searching the term biofield, I started coming up with some things. It was actually very hard to write an academic paper on the use of audible sound therapeutically because medical science makes use of inaudible sound like ultrasound or infrasound, but really doesn't do much with audible sound. And our medical model doesn't really acknowledge that we have this field around our body. And I didn't even really know we did either. For many years, I just worked with my tuning forks close to the body. But then one day, I was working with someone, and I accidentally discovered that she had a loud spot, one of those loud spots that I moved around. I found it about 2.5 feet off the left side of her throat chakra. And she had been complaining that she had pain in her jaw and her neck and down into her shoulder. And she'd been to all of these different practitioners, and no one had been able to help her. And when I found this loud spot, I employed the click, drag, and drop thing, and I moved it. And it's very funny, to drag it so far and dropped it in her throat chakra. And
I really like that. It's a click, drag, and drop. I love the name. I think that's brilliant. It's just brilliant.
Yeah,
I can see you working over a person's body and clicking and dragging and dropping it into the right spot.
It's really, it's funny. It's odd, but it definitely works. And I teach people how to do it. It's not just me that can do this. In fact, I'm about to teach a 3-day class starting tomorrow where I'll be teaching 11 people how to do click, drag, and drop. And that's really the essence of the work. That's really all that it is. So it's this very fascinating, very effective and efficient therapeutic method, and really all you do is just find these loud spots and click, drag, and drop them. So it's really easy too. But anyway, so she called me the very next day, and she said, Eileen, all of that sense of pain, and she'd had a sense of pulling too. She's like, it's completely gone. And I was like, wow, well, that's pretty wild. So the next person who came in, I started as far away as I could in that particular office, which was about 6 feet away. And I started, moving in towards their body on the plane of the treatment table. And I started finding loud spots all over the place. And I was like, wow, this is so bizarre that, and they seem to want to, be in the body, the whole thing was so curious that I was like, what the heck is going on here? It brought up so many questions for me. One of the other things that I discovered that has become one of the key aspects of this work is what I call the biofield anatomy. And that is that this field, which seems to extend about 5 feet out on most people, and 2 or 3 feet on the top and bottom, 5 feet on the sides, seems to have this anatomical structure, and it has revealed itself to me through my own subjective experience to be our mind, what we call our mind, and it's where all our memories are stored. And they're stored in this very specific fashion. It's compartmentalized or stratified, and different areas on different sides of the body seem to hold the record of our experiences of different emotional states, different relationships, different states of mind. And it took years for this sort of full pattern to emerge. But just like the brain is compartmentalized and different parts of the brain are used for different things, it seems like our field is as well. So in addition to this sort of stratified or compartmentalized aspect, there's also a timeline aspect. And as we generate information, so as you go through your day, whatever you're feeling emotionally, whatever you're thinking mentally, whatever you're experiencing in your body, it's producing like this EEG readout that gets sort of laid down in what seem to me to be standing waves. And as we generate this information, it moves away from us. So when I pass the tuning forks around your body, information that I encounter that's close to your body is current or recent. Information I find out at the edge of your field relates to gestation, birth, earliest childhood, and then everything else falls in between, like rings in a tree. And so now I can go through people's fields with my tuning forks. They're like an invisible ink decoder, right? And as they interface with these standing waves of information, the tone changes. And so in places where I find heavy distortion, and depending on where it is relative to the edge of the field in their body and where it falls around their body, in what compartment, I can tell people, if they're 40, that they went through an experience when they were 20 that made them incredibly frustrated, or that they had a head injury when they were 5, or that they're currently experiencing knee pain, or all kinds of things. So I've sort of deciphered the information that's present in this field. And it's a really radically different way of sort of looking at minds, thinking about our minds, that, we actually are carrying around this sort of diffuse magnetic bubble full of standing waves of energy and information. But what's so neat about it is that I can actually go back to the source point in the record and use the introduction of coherent sounds produced by the tuning fork to modulate the information that's present. For example, this is just a good example of how this works. I had a woman come in not that long ago who was suffering from terrible anxiety, and she had her whole life, and she'd been in and out of therapy, and she'd been on and off meds, and nothing had really made a dent in it. And within 5 minutes of her being on my table, I discovered about 5 feet off of her right knee, and the right knee relates to obstacles moving forward, that there was a huge amount of distortion right out at the edge of the field. And I said to her, did you have a traumatic birth? And she said, oh, my God, I almost died. My mom almost died. Like, the whole delivery room was in an uproar. Like, it was totally traumatic. And so the energetic record of that was in this particular place in her field. And I said to her, the very first experience of your nervous system in the world was that you revved all the way up into, like, what I call redlining. You know, it's like when you have like a little inner tachometer. You know, she was like up in like 8 or 9. And so that pathway got bored out in her nervous system. And so as she'd kind of grown up and gone through her life, every time she had a stressful event, she'd just redline because that was where she had gone initially, you know. And unfortunately, pathways that get laid down early become the pathways of our life. So I was able to go into that place and actually modulate that frequency pattern at its source point. And
you're teaching this? You teach this? You have workshops? Where are you located?
Well, I'm in Vermont, but I travel to teach. I'm actually going out to teach in San Diego in February. I'm actually in the process of putting together my calendar for next year. So I don't have, if you go to my website, there's nothing scheduled for 2015 because it's all sort of in process. But what's so neat is that I can teach students to do this. And, you know, one of my students said to me recently that she took the 3-day introductory class, and then she went home and was working with her first practice body, and she was able to identify 3 periods of trauma in this person's life, one of them in utero, and then at other ages. And she was able to, you know, to get it right away. She said, I can't believe that I was able to do this, you know, that I was able to, like, figure out the ages and all of this because it's all laid out in my book. Like, I lay out the whole biofield anatomy map, you know, and the different corresponding physical parts of the body. Like, for example, if people end up with right hip issues, they're very often guilt-driven overdoers who are constantly in motion. And, you know, and so on through the body. There's all of these different sort of, when we have imbalances in our biofield, it's almost like it sequesters chi or vital organizing energy, and it gets stuck in this sort of history. And that informs the physical structure. So when your cells are reproducing and they don't have that information, things start to break down. And this is a way of actually, like, going back to the place where, you know, there's a shamanic concept called soul retrieval, where if anybody's ever had a treatment with a shaman, they'll use what they call journeying or active imagination to go back in time to these places where we had trauma. And if you can't process the trauma, then it's like a part of you kind of splits off and stays there. And the shaman will retrieve that part of you and bring it back and actually, like, blow or place it in the body. And when I first started finding these bits, you know, off in the field and discovering that they were related to traumas from the past and that I could actually, like, pick them up with the tuning parts and drag and drop them back into here and now, I was like, this is like sonic soul retrieval. and
so you actually discovered the science that allows the reality of shamanic soul retrieval. You've given it a kind of a scientific type method to that, yes?
Yes, a context. Yeah, a context for it, for sure. I mean, the scientific explanation is something that I'm really still working on. Like, one of my questions is that this stuff that I find in the field really seems to me like it has mass to it. Like, there's a substance there. And I don't, you know, we could call it chi, but, you know, I'm educated into a Western model, use Western language. I actually teach a course on sound healing at a state college here in Vermont, right? So I'm even kind of bringing this into the academic realm. So I really need to know what I can call it with my Western language. You know, is it free electrons? Is it biophotons? Is it magnetic monopoles? Like,
do you think
light?
it's plasma? Some kind of plasma, some form of plasma?
I think it's plasma. Yeah, that's the conclusion that I come to, and that's what I talk about in my book. I talk about plasma and bioplasma and what that is, and basically it's sort of a soup of free electrons and free ions and photons. So, you know, it's energy. That's what the inclination is, to just call it energy. I asked one of my sons when he was younger, I think he was like 6 or 7, I was like, explain to me what we're doing here. And he said, it's taking energy from where it doesn't belong and putting it where it does belong so it can get to work doing what it's supposed to do.
It's like moving it back into place so it can do. You know, I find this really fascinating. And as I was reading through your book, getting ready for our show together, I thought it was really interesting how you were putting it together in a model. And I thought to myself, why hasn't anybody really done this before? This is brilliant work. And I was really, really impressed with how you did that. And when I found out you were in Vermont just now, I said, oh, do you do sessions? Can I come see you? I would love to experience this.
I do sessions. Well, you know, what's interesting is that I do local sessions, certainly, but I also discovered that I can do this work at a distance. And, you know, people ask me for years, do you do this work distance? And I was like, of course I don't do it at a distance. Like, I use sound waves on a body. Like, this is physics. Like, I don't do it at a distance. And then my mentor, Carl Merritt, who wrote the introduction, the foreword in my book, he convinced me to give it a try. He said, let's just do an experiment, Eileen. And, you know, I love experiments, so I was game for doing an experiment. And he lay down in his home in California, and I pretended that he was on my treatment table in Vermont. And I was completely stunned to discover that as I approached the table, the same kinds of feedback that I encounter when a body is on the table, that, you know, the same information, it all came through. You know, the plasmic story that's there that surrounds all of our bodies, the biofield, it was as if he was really there. And I was able to go through and be like, oh, you know, this happened at this age, and this is going on, and this organ, blah, blah, blah. And I was able to do the whole thing. And he actually felt it and then had, like, a state change afterwards, like people do when they receive it in person. So wild.
So the biofield... So the biofield extends outward, and so when we do the tuning forks on the air tonight, we could imagine that going out through the biofields of the planet and lifting that in love, right? That would be an experiment of sorts. Yeah,
absolutely. That sounds great to me.
All right. Well, we're going to have to take a short break. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to do just that. We're going to do an experiment for the human biofield around the planet as the eclipse ends. We'll be back right after these messages. Okay, everybody, we're back. We're going to do a great experiment in a few minutes. As the eclipse ends tonight, the solar eclipse that we're experiencing right now, we're going to be doing some tuning of the human biofield. Joining me tonight, if you're just tuning in, is Eileen McKusick. She's a sound healer. She's written a beautiful book called Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy. Her link to go to her website is on my homepage right here on Achieve Radio, as well as a link to buy the book. She's located in Vermont, and if you're interested in having a session with her, you can contact her through her website. So, Eileen, how do we start this grand experiment?
Well, we can. Did you say that you had a tuning fork?
I do. I have tuning forks. I had to go find them. That's what took so long. And they resonate at 528 hertz.
Okay. Well, you know what? I actually discovered, too, that I have a tuning fork as well. So I have a 528 hertz fork here with me. And so one of the things that I've been doing lately is working with telluric currents. And telluric currents are flows of electromagnetic energy that run much in the same way waterways do across the surface of the Earth. And they transfer information and energy kind of across the globe. And so yesterday I worked with a friend who's in India, and she got into a line there. You can find them with dowsing rods. I think that what science calls telluric currents are what esoteric literature calls ley lines or dragon lines. I think that they're the same thing. And so I've been going to these lines and actually tuning them and doing it with prayer and intention. But we can do the same thing even if we're not on the line. I mean, certainly the Earth is a plasma environment. Our atmosphere, we're within the plasma bubble of the Earth, which is within the plasma bubble of the sun. And so, and we're also in the non-local field, the ethers. That's one of the things that I talk about in my book, with the hidden elements of plasma and ether and how that they are connected. And it's because ether is holographic, meaning that all of the information in all of the ether that's present everywhere at once is present right here. And that's how I'm able to do these distance sessions, because you can have instantaneous transfer of consciousness within the etheric medium. So simply by using our intention, our attention, and prayer and sound, we can, you and I link up and send some tones out into the airwaves and into the collective ether. And, we want to have a clear intention of what we'd like to intend, healing or illumination or grace or empowerment or hope or, certainly the world can use all of that. Do a few strikes with the tuning fork and just really hold that clear intention. And it works. It really works.
Well, I've read your book, and I can see very clearly after reading your work that that's exactly what it does. And I have experienced it myself. A lot of people have been feeling that this is a form or a modality of healing that doesn't really quite get enough credit. And I'm glad that you've written this book, because it does really bridge a lot of different dimensional aspects of this work into one place. And it does a really good job of clearly giving that information so anybody with any kind of background can really grasp something from it and take that with them. So we're going to do the experiment at 7:52 this evening. That is the official ending of the solar eclipse. And in the meantime, I'd like to talk about perhaps what you feel the world at, this point in the now could really use. What's your opinion of what's going on today?
Well, I think that one of the things that I discovered when I first started doing this work, when I first started sort of creating the protocol and getting the static out of people's signals, getting the noise and static out, I kept finding in every single person this clear and beautiful harmony underneath. And it created a lot of cognitive dissonance for me at first. And I couldn't understand why I was having such a hard time discovering that everybody that I worked on was great. And I realized it took some thinking to kind of figure it out. But I realized that I was raised in a religion-free home, but we were raised in a Christian culture, and the story, the creation story, the cosmology of our Christian culture is that we're all guilty sinners who have fallen from grace. And as a consequence, at the kernel of every dysfunction I have ever found in anybody is a belief that they're not worthy, that they're not worthy of their own greatness. And underneath the static, underneath the noise in everybody is amazing. Like, people are amazing, and to be human is such an amazing thing, and we're so powerful, and we're so full of grace, and we have so much essential harmony that is in essential harmony with the rest of the universe, and nobody believes that about themselves. Most people have a very punishing inner critic that wants to tell them all the time that they're not good enough, that they're not thin enough, that they're not rich enough, that they're not sexy enough, that, it goes on and on and on. And it creates a huge amount of static in their field. And the fact of the matter is that underneath that static, everybody is perfect, and everybody is harmonious, and everybody is awesome. And how many people really can allow that in themselves? Can you allow an inner dialogue of, I am amazing, I am full of grace, I am worthy? If everybody recognized their own harmony, the world would reflect that. But people are walking around self-identifying with the static and noise and thinking that that is who they are. So I would just like to get some noise out of the signal, because when you take the noise out of the signal, what's great and graceful just arises naturally.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. So that is going to be our intention for our experiment here tonight. We're going to get rid of the static. We're going to rebalance, would you say? Reharmonize?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll send that out into the ether and the plasmic biofields and through the airwaves to the world. And that will be our ending experiential prayer to our time through the eclipse. I just love that. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is fantastic. As I was reading through, a couple questions came up as I was reading through the material, personal reflective questions, but also some questions I thought everybody here tonight would want to, kind of muse on. Relationships, when we're moving into a time when the connective abilities of human beings is exponentially moving in a vast, beautiful forward direction. And we're so often still tied into our past programming, all those things in the plasmic field that you find, like tree rings. I loved how you put that. That kind of hinder us from being in our full potential. Do you think that sound healing is actually part of a new kind of science and technology that will become more in the forefront of people's awareness as we progress through our evolution? For example, Dr. Masaru Emoto passed away recently, and he did a lot of the same kind of work you're doing, but he did it with water crystals. So, it just feels to me like, he's one of those people that is going to sincerely help us, like a founding father, if you will, of modern to come, in the future type technology, where we really have to get back to basics and rethink how we see things so that we can bring back a pristine type of health, not only for human beings, but for the planet. So I look at you and your work as kind of being one of those founding mothers. That feminine principle that really takes us back into who we really are and shows us how we can simply and beautifully and harmonically rebalance, our systems. So I guess my question is, as when it comes to human relationships and that kind of twine, I call it the twine, between people that, they can get into these fields and they can move in any direction. And so could that possibly be how that works in that psychic, intuitive type, communicative, telepathic abilities between people? Because the model seems to fit what you describe with your sound work. I'm curious if you've had any kind of crossover, experiences with the stuff that you found with sound into personal relationships.
Well, you're making me think of one of the things that I do with couples is I have them sit facing each other in chairs, and I actually come in the space between them and examine the dynamic of their energies and how their energies are interfacing. And, we talk about our soulmate and how our soulmate, like, we want to go off in bliss with the soulmate. Well, what your soulmate does is they trigger the stuff that's in your field, right? I mean, we all know that intimate relationships, you bring up your stuff. And what I find is that people think that they're fighting about something that has to do with now, but what they're really doing is acting out their old wounds from childhood. And I think that just as humanity in a larger sense, there's just a whole lot of old patterns that are stuck in particular dynamics. And it's all on this energetic level. And as we start to, the whole idea of being able to treat the field, right? I mean, we're so stuck in this model of solid, liquid, and gas, a sort of chemical, mechanical approach to body and mind, the idea that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of brain activity, and that everything is separate. And the idea of energy fields is like woo-woo and pseudoscience. But this work, and I feel like it's really, I'm only in the infancy. I felt like I've been fumbling in the dark, sort of accidentally discovering these things.
Thank you for doing that.
I feel like there's so much more to be discovered, about how we can use sound to modulate energy. And I think the sky is the limit because the essential nature of the universe, to me, is harmony. And we have thousands of years of human history of things with all kinds of warps and twists and wounds and, vendettas. and what I'm seeing here is that this can all be harmonized. It can all be cleared. It's like one of my colleagues called myself and my students the etheric cleanup crew, and that as within, so without, right? So as we start to clean up all of this karma and this old noise and this inherited blah, 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 I mean, one of the things that I routinely discover is that people inherit emotional patterning from their parents, from their grandparents. So, people can be carrying around certain emotional states like constant sadness or anxiety, and it's something that they picked up in utero. Like, it isn't even theirs, but they self-identify with it. And what's so wonderful is that we can go in and tune it and get it to stop vibrating in that pattern. And then all of a sudden they're like, wow, I'm just not feeling that anymore. And then you know what? They're not going to pass that on to their children.
Amen. So when people are getting ready to do this kind of work, what do you suggest what tools do we need to be able to be effective sound workers, practitioners? What would you suggest somebody do? Go out and buy a set of tuning forks or start with a certain frequency? Or where do you usually tell your students to begin?
Well, the way that the process, I call it sound balancing, the way that it has evolved, actually at one point I was using up to 30 different tuning forks in a session. I just use 4. So I use 2 unweighted forks. I use 2 forks from the 9-piece unweighted standard solfeggio set. I use the 174 hertz fork and the 528 hertz fork. And I use those in the field like a comb. Like, if you've got long hair and you have a comb, you've got fat tines and skinny tines, and you go through first with the fat tines and then through the skinny tines. So that's what I do. I comb through first with the 174, the low frequency, and then I comb through again in the same area with the 528, or the high frequency. And I actually sell the forks that I use on my website. So at my website, you can get my book, you can get these 4 forks, and I also have instructional videos that people can watch that talk about specific protocols for things like pain, anxiety, PTSD, that sort of thing. I think the number one requirement to be a sound healer is presence, is being able to be present with somebody else and listen very deeply and pay attention and set a clear intention. One of the key words in sound healing and energy medicine in general is coherence. That the tuning fork produces a coherent signal. It's orderly. It has a good structure to it. We're seeking to induce coherence into a person's physiology. When you've had a lot of trauma or a lot of injuries, you have a lot of different pockets of different kinds of frequencies going on, right? And we all know people whose car is a mess or house is a mess or life is a mess, and it's just because they've had so many traumatic inputs that they've lost their coherence. And so, we're all transmitters and receivers of energy all the time. I mean, even just as an individual, you are a tuning fork. We are all constantly emitting different frequencies. We all act like tuning forks around each other, right? I mean, when you're around somebody who has a really good vibe and they make you feel good, right? Because they're emanating coherent energy. Whereas if you're around somebody, who's a mess, they're emanating incoherent energy, then it affects you. It makes you feel bad. So the way that we become coherent is by taking care of ourselves, by making sure we get enough rest, by making sure we eat properly, by making sure we speak our truth. That's a really huge thing. One of my favorite things to say when I speak at classes or conferences is that as a sound healer, I've discovered that the most powerful thing in the universe is right under your nose, and it's your mouth. And, what are you saying and how are you saying it? What is the tone that you're using? What are you speaking in your own mind towards yourself? What are you speaking to other people? And the biggest problem that I discover in people's fields is what I call emotional constipation, where they put up and shut up. They, people pleasers who take care of everybody else but don't take care of themselves. Women, this is something that I see a lot, women who develop fibromyalgia, they're almost incapable of recognizing their own needs and successfully advocating for their own needs. But when we take care of ourselves, then we create coherence in our system. And that's one of the most important things that you can do. So, you start off by taking care of yourself and then have a genuine willingness to help take care of other people. And, sound is such a wonderful medium because there really is physics at work. The sound does the work, and a big part of it. And it's wonderful to have that tool. So just by being healthy yourself and being quiet and then kind of approaching, with the sound, it's just amazing what can happen.
So what is the difference between a weighted tuning fork and an unweighted tuning fork? I know somebody's thinking the question out there. I can feel it. And I want to know, too. I was just looking at your website to see the tools. But what's the difference between the two?
So the difference between the two is that the unweighted forks are just like when you think of a tuning fork, like if you were going to use a tuning fork to tune an instrument, for example, the sort of standard image in our mind of what a tuning fork looks like. And these are the ones that I use in the body's energy field. The weighted forks have these little round discs or barrels on the end, and those are designed to be used on the body. So we activate those and then place the handle, the end of the handle, on places where there are like muscle knots or tension or congestion of any kind. So I use them both in the field, the unweighted ones in the field, and then the weighted ones on the body. So that's the difference between the two. And I also discovered that if I use a quartz crystal, and what I call a crystal intermediary, so you know how crystals have a pointy end and then sort of a flat end, if I run the sound through the quartz crystal into the body, it gives it more bang for the buck. Because what quartz does is it translates the sound current into an amplified pulse. Right, so that's why quartz is used, like in timekeeping, for example, is because it takes an electric current and it translates it into a rhythmic pulse. So it also amplifies it in the process. And I found that sending the sound through the crystals and sending these little amplified pulses of sound, it's amazing for like breaking up trigger points, muscle knots, that sort of thing. So if somebody's like a massage therapist, they can incorporate using a weighted fork and a little crystal into their practice and save their thumbs and their elbows, because it's like having a little jackhammer, and it can just dissolve knots. It's a wonderful tool to have.
Now, what about water when you do the sound through water? Have you done any work with that to see what the effects are through water?
I haven't. I do have some colleagues who have. There's this wonderful place in Steamboat Springs, Nevada, where they are using acoustic frequencies. They have a special tubs where they're sending sound through the water. You know, sound travels 4 to 5 times faster through water than it does through air. So it's a really great conductive medium. There's some higher-end bathtubs, too, that also have speakers in them where you can, you know, take a bath and have healing tones sent through the water. You know, certainly your body is mostly water. So, you know, just by applying the weighted fork on the body, that those sound waves are, you know, traveling right through. Your bones are conductive as well, you know, even faster. There's so many wonderful things that can be done with sound, and it's really such a frontier. You know, it's such an area of discovery just sort of waiting to be explored.
Very exciting. This is very exciting. So everybody, please go get this book and read it because it's very, 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 very good. And not only is it good, it's also very informative. It gives you a lot of information, a lot of ideas, and you know, it's really worth looking into these traditional, I call them traditional therapies because I don't believe that they're alternative. I think there's just so much proof out there now and so much work, and so many people like Eileen have done their job to really bring the information to the surface so that we can all benefit from it. And, you know, they've pulled it out of the collective consciousness and manifested it into some way that we can all learn and benefit. And this is just one of those things. So we're here at our experiment time. So how do we, do you want to do the sound from where you are?
Sure. I'll do the sound from where I am, and what I'll do is I'm going to activate the tuning forks 3 times and let it ring out, and we'll just hold the intention, you and I together, and anybody who's listening who wants to both receive what we're sending and maybe also contribute to the intention as well, going out into the collective, and we'll just do it 3 times and then see what we notice when we're done.
Right. And so what we'll do is she's going to do what she just said. But what I'd like you to remember is our intention here is to clear the static and to infuse love, whatever that means to you, whatever love means to you. So we're going to clear the static and just focus on a feeling of love and let that biochemistry come into the biohuman field. And we're going to spend a few minutes saying goodbye to the eclipse on a beautiful note.
Nice. Okay. Here we go. Okay.
Now I'm going to try mine and see how that sounds. Okay, my turn. I'm going to do it 3 times, and we're going to do the same intention.
Right.
That was great.
I'm feeling the love.
I am too. It's a good thing. We almost are off the air in a couple minutes because I need to go take a nice hot bath and go to bed. It's been a long day. Well, Eileen, I want to just say, we are so grateful that you could join us tonight. And, in the last few minutes, while we're on the air, I know we're all still kind of there in that tone and we're feeling it and it's great. But I want to give Eileen a chance to let us all know, once again, where we can find her and what she has coming up so that we can possibly learn some more.
Right. Well, I have a website, EileenMcKusick.com, and I have a little store on my website where you can purchase tuning forks, instructional videos of my book. You can also get my book at Amazon and numerous other online places. I have a page on my website that talks about my calendar, and that page is in blank at the moment. I just got back from California. I spoke at 3 different conferences out there as sort of a book launch program, which was really fun. And I will be speaking at more conferences coming up this year, and I will be putting together a calendar of classes. So I do teach this method in Vermont, and I teach it in California as well. My next scheduled class will be in San Diego in February, but I don't have dates yet. I will also be in the Bay Area in February as well. And, if there's anybody out there who really wants to organize a class and have me come, I will travel to teach, too, for about 10 people or so. So that's also an option if you've got a place and a group and you want me to come out. I'm really happy to share this work because it's simple, it's easy to learn, and it's so effective for so many different things. So, it's really heartening to be able to help people to feel better, to diminish anxiety, to relieve pain, to improve digestion, to get rid of migraines and vertigo. There's so many different things that this work treats, and yet it's so simple and easy to learn.
Amen. I am a believer. Mm-hmm. I'm still floating in that beautiful space. So we're going to say goodnight. And next week, joining me on the air will be John St. Augustine. He returns to talk about love, my favorite topic, just in time for Halloween. Thank you, Eileen. Thanks so much for being here. And everybody tuning in, I appreciate you being here as well. And until next time, namaste. Good night, everyone.